Well, to further understand the role of private military contractors in war zones, let's speak now to Yusuf Alabarda, who's a military analyst and a former NATO officer. He's joining us from Ankara in Turkey. Thank you so much, Mr. Alabarda, for being with us on Al Jazeera. First of all, based on your military experience, can you tell us what the typical reasons are behind governments or institutions outsourcing security roles in conflict zones to private military contractors rather than using their own forces? Why does Israel use military contractors in Gaza?
When you take a look at to their existence, it is not a new phenomenon. But especially after the Cold War, the armies of all over the world has downsized. But at the same time, the demand has increased. For that reason, the private military contractors just after the Cold War was in every part of the world, including Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., and in many different countries of Africa. People were using private military contractors, especially in the areas of conflict, in order to overcome the difficulties that they have encountered. But one of the biggest advantages of using private military contractors, they are not responsible to anyone, and they are under-regulated. For this reason, many countries has used private military contractors for their dirty works to be done. From the perspective of the Israel army, who is using the private military contractors, it is some kind of outsourcing the genocide. Because Netanyahu is a war criminal now, and he doesn't want to use IDF in all the genocide. He want to use the private contractors in the food distribution centers in order to collect intelligence, in order to shoot defenseless people, and for many different purposes, but especially usage of private contractors inside Gaza, especially now at the humanitarian distribution centers, mainly based on Netanyahu's Gaza plan for ethnic cleansing and also changing the demography inside Gaza.
Okay, you've given us a great deal of important information there. As far as these private contractors, military contractors that are operating in Gaza right now, what do we know about them? And can you describe what sort of training, if any, PMC personnel you typically undergo before being deployed to a live conflict zone like Gaza? Is it possible that some of these men are poorly trained or even civilians with minimal background checks?
There is no need for any kind of trainings. Most of them are the veterans from various countries' armies, especially from the armed forces of the United States. We can see these veterans even as generals in some Gulf countries in their armed forces. But in Israeli case, why Israel is using them is not because of their trainings, it is because it is under-regulated. So no one knows who is killing these defenseless Gazan people. If you ask to Netanyahu, after a couple of years later in the International Court of Justice, he will probably say, I do not know who they are. If they want to know, go and find them from somewhere else in the Nepal, in the South America, or etc.
So what does international law? What does international law say about their use? Can they be held responsible for war crimes?
If you can find their track inside Gaza, yes, you can judge them. But what is the most important thing? No one knows their IDs, because in the Baghdad, in Fallujah, in Abu Ghraib prison, they have done what they do. And at the very end, no one was responsible. It will be the same for the Gaza. At the very end, no one knows their IDs. So they are someone who is fighting with no IDs. For that reason, they are not responsible. No regulation.
Okay. Mr. Alabarda, let me ask you about military doctrine now. We often hear about Israel's so-called Dahia doctrine. Can you explain to our viewers what this is? What is a military doctrine? And does Israel's military doctrine distinguish between combatants and civilians in urban warfare, especially in a region like Gaza, in practice, or is it only in policy?
especially in the Dahia doctrine, they do use artificial intelligence a lot. By using the artificial intelligence, Israel has recorded for so many years that that house used that amount of water and that amount of people is living in this house. So they were bombing deliberately according to their plans in order to make it accordingly. So Israel is using the Dahia plan for demography change and using the ethnic cleansing in a more effective way. For that issue, Israel is using also many different styles of doctrines, such as Dahia doctrine, and also we know that Hannibal doctrine. We know also that they are using in the West Bank area many different doctrines in order to ruin the understructure of West Bank city. The Dahia doctrine is distinguishing the Gazan people who is living in the north, who is living in the south, according to the Israelis plan, which is mostly interconnected with these private contractors who is collecting intelligence for that issues, but at the same time is interconnected with artificial intelligence in order to create the genocide in a more effective way.
So interesting to talk to you about this. Thank you so much for your insight. That was Yusuf Alabarda, a military analyst and a former NATO officer joining us there from Ankara. Thank you for your time.